The blade punched through the painted pine, tearing my sweater and burying itself in my spine. When the sirens finally wailed, I told the cops it wasn't his fault. How do you protect the man who just tried to kill you when you're terrified the person holding the knife isn't him at all? It started with quiet disappearances, then the screaming, then a locked door that couldn't keep the darkness out. The silence in our house used to be heavy, breathing through the floorboards and wrapping around my shoulders like wet wool. I knew the exact cadence of his footsteps, the reassuring click of the front door latch, the way evening light caught dust motes dancing between us. We built a fortress out of quiet routines. He was the man who remembered my coffee order before I woke, who rubbed my lower back after long shifts, whose steady gaze made the outside world feel miles away. Then the foundation cracked. It didn't arrive with a slammed door, it seeped into the drywall like groundwater until the walls groaned. First, his eyes tracked invisible text in the corners. His hands, once steady enough for architectural lines, trembled around a ceramic mug. He answered questions I hadn't asked, jaw locking until his molars ached. The deep rumble of his laughter vanished, replaced by a brittle tension that made the air thin. One evening, he folded laundry, humming the next. He stared into the kitchen drain, muttering about frequencies, and the power grid humming too loud. The invitations from friends stopped, met by an impenetrable wall of silence. He killed his location sharing, leaving his laptop glowing with encrypted forums on the dining table. When his childhood friend called about a cabin trip, he listened to the voicemail 3 times before deleting it without a word. Then came the midnight drives. I'd wake to tires tearing through wet asphalt, the engine revving with a violent urgency that vibrated in my teeth. He returned with receipts for tactical gear, encrypted drives, industrial purifiers, his gaze sliding past my face like I was glass. I reached for his forearm, voice trembling, but he pulled away, rubbing his palms raw, whispering that the noise was getting louder. The physical toll arrived sharp and undeniable, painting bruises on his body and fear in my gut. I found him curled on the kitchen linoleum, knuckles white against the floor. He gasped that the ceiling was tilting, the walls pulsing in a suffocating rhythm. Vise-like headaches forced him down with muffled whimpers. I pressed cold compresses to his temples as he sweated through 3 shirts before noon. But the blood was the true nightmare. A copper drip in the sink became a rust stain on his collar, then a relentless flow every afternoon that stained towels crimson and left porcelain slick. I begged for the hospital, pleading for tests for a cure. He backed into the wall, eyes wide with feral terror. "They are watching," he hissed. "Clinics are traps." I believed him, not because it made sense, but because the raw terror on his face felt more real than any diagnosis. Tuesday arrived draped in suffocating rain, drumming against the roof like nervous fingers. The house echoed with a ticking clock I couldn't ignore. I sat on the unmade bed, staring at my phone until pixels blurred. The distance between us was an ocean. I typed with shaking thumbs, "I feel so lost without you. Please just come sit with me. We don't have to talk." The 3 dots appeared, dissolved, reappeared. I braced for the cold shoulder. Instead, the bedroom door swung inward without a sound. He stood there, collarbone exposed through an unbuttoned flannel, hair damp and clinging to his forehead. His pupils swallowed his irises, reflecting the dim room like shattered mirrors. He didn't speak. He marched forward with a jerky, mechanical gait, breathing shallow and ragged, fists tight. Before I could shift, he grabbed the mattress edge. He yanked with shocking force. Springs groaned. Wood scraped carpet. I hit the floor hard, teeth rattling, but scrambled up instinctively, panic and loyalty warring in my chest. I stepped toward him, arms outstretched, ignoring every primal alarm. I just wanted to hold him. He recoiled as if my hands were blades. A guttural, fractured noise tore from his throat, half scream, half sob. He stumbled back, colliding with the dresser, hands flying to his ears to block a deafening radio. I closed the distance, tears spilling hot, whispering his name, telling him I was safe. The words dissolved before reaching him. He screamed, voice cracking into something feral, shouting that he knew exactly what I was planning. "You want to break me?" he yelled. "You're part of the chorus. Everyone is waiting to tear me apart." I froze. The air turned to ice in my lungs. I finally saw the truth in the hollows of his face. The man I married was trapped behind bulletproof glass. Something else wore his skin. I turned my back on the void and walked into the hallway, boots dragging like lead. I needed to breathe without suffocating on his paranoia. 2 steps later, the floor vibrated beneath me. He was right there, hot breath grazing my neck, footsteps echoing too fast, too heavy. I turned toward the spare room, desperate for an exit, when the ground lurched. He had seized the thick air mattress near the baseboards, dragging it with terrifying strength to sweep my legs. I stumbled, ribs catching the wall as he babbled about clearing the perimeter. I ran. I ducked into the bathroom, fingers fumbling blindly against the cold brass deadbolt. It clicked with satisfying finality, just as his full weight slammed the wood. The frame shuddered. Plaster dust rained down like dry snow. I backed into the corner beside the tub, hands over my mouth to stifle ragged gasps, heart hammering a bruising rhythm against my ribs. Through the narrow seam, I heard him slap the wood, then drop to his knees with a heavy thud. Pounding fractured into sobbing. He begged me to open it, alternating with hollow threats to rip the hinges off. His voice splintered, cycling through rage, despair, and chilling calm. I stayed on the cold floor, praying the wood would hold, praying the storm would exhaust itself. Then the scraping started. A sharp, metallic shriek against the paint, like a crowbar testing rotten wood. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering he was just checking the lock. But the sound dropped lower, dragging, biting, digging deeper. A wet grunt of exertion, the sickening crack of splintering timber, then a deafening pop echoed through the small room. I didn't have time to brace. 6 inches of cold steel punched through the door at spine level, tearing my sweater and biting deep into my back. White-hot agony exploded across my nervous system. I collapsed forward, cheeks slamming against cold porcelain, gasping as warmth immediately soaked my clothes. The metal twisted. He didn't pull back. He leaned into it, voice trembling on the other side, muttering about closing the breach. The pressure vanished. The blade clattered to the tile inside. Through the jagged hole, I caught a sliver of his face. His eyes weren't focused. They were wide with hollow, childlike confusion, darting as if he'd just blinked awake in a stranger's bed. He stared at his empty hand, then the ruined door, then the knob. No triumph, no malice, just devastating, hollow terror. In that fractured second, realization settled over me like a lead shroud. The deadbolt, the solid wood, the sanctuary none of it meant anything. The lock was an illusion, and he shattered it without knowing he held the weapon. My mind hadn't been attacked by a monster, it had been breached by a storm I couldn't stop. My fingers moved before my brain processed the shock. I dragged myself across slick tiles, leaving a smeared crimson trail, vision tunneling until only the phone remained. I grabbed it, thumbs slipping as I dialed 911, gasping my address. Outside, the knob jiggled weakly, then went still. When sirens cut through the downpour, wailing like wounded animals, I heard him slide down the wall on the other side, forehead thumping softly against the wood. I closed my eyes, the knife lying inches from my fingers, and let the darkness take me. They kicked the door in. Heavy boots pounded tile. Strong hands lifted me, wrapping sterile gauze around the puncture wound as another team dragged him into the hallway, cuffed, disoriented, weeping silently. They sat me on the gurney in the pouring rain, asking what happened, if I was safe, if I wanted him locked away forever. I looked at flashing red and blue lights reflecting in puddles, at his hollow silhouette in the squad car, at the man who spent a decade building me a home only to accidentally burn it down. I shook my head, tears mixing with rain on my collar. He didn't mean it, I told them. He wasn't there. He was drowning, and I just wanted to throw him a rope instead of an anchor. They wrote it down, exchanged heavy glances, and drove away into the storm. Now I sit in a sterile corridor, spine throbbing in time with my pulse, wondering if defending his sickness just left me bleeding on the floor. I stare at my trembling hands, asking if love means locking the cage, or sitting on the cold tile beside the storm until the rain stops.
Hello, I'm Dr. Julian Reed. What we observe here aligns with acute paranoid psychosis, coupled with dissociative amnesia pattern, where a stable individual suffers a rapid fracture in reality testing, often catalyzed by intersecting psychological and physiological stressors. The paranoia you described, the perception that loved ones intend harm, the volatile escalation when cornered, these are not choices. They are symptoms, yet symptoms do not erase consequences. Your confusion is not weakness. It is the rational response to an irrational situation. You cared for a kind, loving man, then watched him become unrecognizable. To feel torn between fear for your safety and concern for his suffering is not contradiction, it is clarity. You hold two truths: he hurt you, and he may not have been fully himself when he did. Both can be true, That tension is where compassion lives, but also where danger hides. Note the physical symptoms: dizziness, headaches, daily nosebleeds. These are not incidental. When psychiatric symptoms emerge alongside neurological complaints, we must consider an organic trigger, a medical condition manifesting as behavioral crisis. This does not excuse the violence. It contextualizes it. Context is not absolution. The moment he drove the knife through that door, the dynamic shifted. Regardless of intent or internal experience, your body bore the mark. The dissociation he displayed afterward, apparent lack of recall, may be a protective neurological response, or a refusal to integrate the horror of his actions. We cannot know without thorough evaluation. What we do know is this: you were injured. You were terrified. You locked yourself away to survive. That is not drama. That is data. And still, you defended him. You told authorities you didn't believe he acted intentionally. That loyalty speaks to your character, not his culpability. But loyalty cannot be a leash that keeps you in harm's way. The central question is not whether he is a monster or a victim of illness. The question is whether you can be safe while he receives the care he desperately needs. Safety is not negotiable. Treatment is possible, but they are not the same path. So I leave you with this: when someone you love becomes a source of danger, where do you draw the line between mercy and self-preservation? Is it possible to hold space for his healing without sacrificing your own? The answer is not in the abstract. It is in the next choice you make. What will yours be?